Meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Sometimes Jesus is hard to pin down because it seems like he has different personalities, because he has different ways of being with different people. He does have kind of this way of seeming one way. Maybe he's more angry to some people. He's more gentle with other people. But Jesus in the Gospels is human, dealing with very human things, dealing with different humans under different circumstances. Jesus was alive, and he had a message for sometimes large groups and sometimes very, very specific individuals. And he had a way of knowing just what that group or that individual needed to hear. And it takes a lot of discernment and care to do that. It takes strength and courage and listening and a deep-seated belief in your ideals and your mission in order to speak the truth to people. So today he has something that he wants to say to Martha. I call this my Martha sermon because Martha gets to this business of hospitality when Jesus enters her home. But then, she's doing all this stuff, and then Martha gets mad because she's doing all the work trying to be hospitable. And there is her sister Mary just sitting at Jesus' feet and listening to him. And so Martha complains to Jesus, and hey, look at all this work that I'm doing. Doesn't it concern you that she, Mary, is not lifting a finger? What about the importance of hospitality like we hear about in Genesis today? We hear in this Genesis reading with Abraham, he's busy. He and Sarah are busy with hospitality, bringing water, offering shade, because that's what you did back then. You took care of strangers. When people came to your door, you had to show hospitality. It was a thing. It was a demand. So Martha thinks she's doing what she's supposed to do. But it seems that Jesus isn't all that concerned. So who is Jesus today? Well, I like to say that, especially in this gospel, that today we've got mellow Jesus. And mellow Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. Don't worry about it. Now, I bet we can all relate to Martha. After all, there's a lot to be worried about in our lives, in the world, as there was back when Martha and Mary were around. Now, just take a think on this. Jesus comes to their house. Now, Jesus is being followed by the religious authorities. They're trying to trap him all the time. He's a controversial figure. Maybe Martha is worried she will be punished somehow, or there might be retribution because of this rebel, Jesus, casually just laying around her house. Could she be worried for her safety? Who knows what she's worried about, but she's worried and she's busy. But is she busy for the right reasons? So Jesus challenges her today. Martha, Martha, why are you are worried and distracted by many things. Now, there's nothing worse than when you're upset about something and someone says to you, hey, relax, don't worry about it. I don't know, that infuriates me. I want them to get upset just like me. This must have infuriated her. It's kind of like that parable of the prodigal son where one brother does all the right things and then the other slacks off and gets all the attention, right? But here's the thing about Jesus. He says what he wants to say, to whom he wants to say it, and when it needs to be said, because he tells people what they need to hear. So, in the past, you may remember the story, Jesus was Jesus berated a Pharisee for not showing him hospitality. So you would think that hospitality was important. But here in this story, Martha needs to understand that she is bypassing what is important because she busies herself and she worries about too much. Her good deed of hospitality might actually be keeping her from listening to Jesus and what that might mean for her life. So she is allowing herself to be distracted in part by judging her sister Mary, because that's the thing, the easy thing to do. She's allowing herself to be distracted. And what she really needs to do first, above and beyond anything, is to lay at the feet of Jesus like Mary so she can hear what Jesus is calling her to do. In other words, Jesus is telling us not to worry about what God is doing in other people's lives. Worry about what God is doing in your own life, okay? And spend time first at the feet of Jesus. So Martha is getting a kind of a wake-up call to put her cares, her fears, her worries first at the feet of Jesus so that she can do some active listening and some intentional listening. So for us, every day we make choices. We make decisions, we do activities, and I wonder sometimes, are we distracting ourselves? And that can happen at church, too. We can be very, very busy with stuff, but are we listening? Distracting ourselves from doing our part of building up God's kingdom on earth. It's not what we do with our time, but why we are doing it. Are we doing things out of obligation, out of duty, out of fear, because we want acknowledgement, because we're supposed to do this thing or that thing, or because our heart is guiding us to do the right thing? And remember last week I talked a lot about doing the right thing. And sometimes we can even get distracted by doing the right thing. And even then we sometimes have to pull back a bit, put ourselves back at the feet of Jesus again to do some more listening. Because just because we think we've heard Jesus once doesn't mean we don't have to hear from him ever again. So we have to always go back to Jesus. Now, sometimes hospitality isn't just about doing things for people to make them feel good. Well, that's okay too when we do that, but hospitality isn't just about doing that. It's not to just show or prove that we are welcoming. Now, a lot of the time, hospitality is about listening and really trying to make a connection. Hospitality is about relationship building. Because when 2 or 3 are not only gathered, but are truly listening to each other, Jesus is in the midst. So be curious about others. Listen to their stories. Ask questions. Because being curious about another person, that disarms fears. It disarms hesitations about being with someone who might be different from us, someone we don't know, and it allows us to be present with others in a much more engaged way. Maybe to even understand why they are the way they are. Because being curious about another person gives that other person humanity. Like their lives are important. What they believe is important. It gives the other a voice that is different from our own soundtracks that are going on in our head. To be curious about someone is active listening. It's fearless listening. And it is what Jesus wants Martha to do today. Lay down at the feet of Jesus. Find that time to hear what God may be saying to you. Now, we know that division is everywhere. There's no getting away from it. And it seems like it gets worse and worse. The wake-up call is that unless we start listening to each other, which means being curious about others, our common life and our communities will continue to be in disarray. We will be anxious. We will be distracted. Are we listening to each other, to the lonely, to the outcast, to the foreigner, the children, especially children? Do we listen to children? The helpless, those who have different ideologies than we have. Unless we start listening to the other and stop being defensive or self-righteous, we won't get anywhere. We'll just dig our heels in and defend our ground, one-upping each other with clever and destructive quips. Change won't happen if we continue to do that. So we can't afford to be distracted by busy work. Today, Jesus is saying, listen to me first. When you listen to me first, you will hear the cries. You will hear the protests. You will hear the loneliness. You will hear the anger. You will hear the frustration. You will hear the tears, and you will hear the joy. If you listen to me, you will know what to do. Come here. Put your stuff down. Sit at my feet and listen. Then you will know what to do. Because it's so much easier when you listen to me first. Now, what would it mean to close our eyes and imagine sitting at the feet of Jesus and just sit there and listen? Because Christians have a duty, an obligation to be forces of peace. Now, if we're able to follow Jesus and walk in his footsteps, we first have to drop everything and find his feet. It's not a big mystery. And I guarantee you that if you do this with intention, you will hear something. Something. You may not like it, but you'll hear something. You may fight it, but you will hear something. You'll hear something that will tell you what you need to know. Maybe you knew it all along what you needed to be doing, but you didn't want to hear it. Or maybe you'll have an aha, epiphany moment. Now, a lot of the discord today in our world, in our communities, is a result of people feeling like they're not being heard. And a lot of our discourse is also about who's the loudest and who can garner the most attention. So sometimes, it's hard. It's hard to listen. And respecting the dignity of every human being means listening and being heard. So it goes both ways. You may have heard this expression, the biggest communication problem is that we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. We must first listen to Jesus before we can truly listen to each other. Well, that's all fine and good, but how do we do that? How do we listen to Jesus? It's easy. Prayer. Prayer is the technology that opens our hearts, and prayer is the technology that opens our ears to Jesus, to God's plan. So when we find ourselves worrying and being fearful, busying ourselves with too many tasks, think about the words of Jesus today and say to yourself, Martha, Martha, Jen, fill in the blank. You are worried and distracted about many things. Stop what you're doing. Think about Jesus sitting there, mellow. After all, it's the middle of summer, it's hot. Throw down your pots and pans and sit there at the feet of Jesus. Sit in prayer, even if it's 10 minutes of silence. Listen first. Trust it. And I guarantee you that you will be refreshed to handle the burdens and the fears that come along to distract you. Hospitality means listening, being intensely curious about the other person. It's not a duty, it is a way of being. It's relationship building. It's hard work sometimes, because sometimes we don't want to listen. But it's part of loving God and loving neighbor, what we heard about last week. In fact, loving God and loving neighbor simply means that we must have faith in God. And, just as importantly, we must have faith in each other. We got to start having faith in each other. And it starts with listening first. Amen.